Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Cyber attacks have been a concern for some time, and last month, one hit close to home, briefly shutting down Monroe County's court system.
This, not much unlike other attacks that have been happening across the country.
Another attack has paralyzed government services in Clay County. Indiana has launched a new Medicaid program aimed at helping caregivers of the elderly, but it has led to more questions than answers.
We had some cases that were already started and got stopped and denied.
The state says there are more than 9,000 people on the program's wait list. And we'll take a look behind the numbers in the latest ILEARN results, which came out this week. We'll have these stories, plus the latest news from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Indiana students made slow but steady gains on the English language arts section of the state's ILEARN test this year, but they still struggle with math. Now, that's according to the latest ILEARN test results released Wednesday. The ILEARN test measures students' progress in multiple subjects from 3rd to 8th grade. Now, overall, 41% of students scored proficient in English language arts this year. 41% achieved proficiency in math, but the current pass rates for both sections remain lower than they were before the pandemic. For more on the results, we're joined by Indiana Public Broadcasting education reporter Kristen Adair. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show. A lot of numbers to kind of break down. Hope to make this kind of easy, but third graders, they were kindergartners during the pandemic, so kind of seen as the most vulnerable. So how were their scores?
Yeah, so third graders this year, it was really interesting because they were some of the lowest among all of the English language arts scores, but they actually scored higher than other grades in math, even though their math scores did not improve. So since 2022, most other grades have remained about above 40% in English language arts, but the third graders are a bit lower than that. It's been kind of interesting because since 2022, a lot of the scores for most grades have been fairly stagnant. There hasn't been much of a change above 2.6% in either direction for most grades, but in third grade specifically, we're seeing those third graders really struggling with English language arts, which is very interesting considering the school's push for to improve kids' literacy scores on the iRead as well.
Now, how about minorities and other vulnerable groups?
Yes, so Black students saw increases in both math and English language arts. Hispanic students actually saw losses in both of those areas. Then the other demographics were a little bit mixed, but it has been really interesting just to see how students have kind of increased or decreased depending on just different demographics. Black students are still passing at a disproportionately lower rate than their white and Hispanic counterparts. So yeah, there are definitely improvements to make in all areas though.
So how about groups or grade that maybe saw some improvements?
Yes, actually 7th grade saw improvements in math and English language arts, which was a bit surprising because they were the only grade to see improvements in both of those areas. Katie Jenner said at the State Board of Education meeting on Wednesday that the 7th graders had seen they struggled a little bit in some of the testing. So it was interesting to see them make those bounds, even though they weren't incredibly significant. They were still a step in the right direction.
So what's the state now trying to do to improve these numbers?
So the state right now is working on implementing checkpoints in the ILEARN test itself. It's kind of a restructuring of this test. Usually there's one summative test at the end of the year, and that's what's used to really gauge how students are doing. Instead of doing that, the state wants to implement 3 different checkpoints throughout the year and then add a smaller summative test so that students, teachers, and parents specifically can really look at students' progress and see, oh, they're struggling in these areas. You know, maybe we can step in before this end of the year summative test and put some plans in place to help them succeed a little bit more by the end of the year, so it will help them more when they get to the next grade.
Kirsten Adair, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now in Monroe County, about 4 in 10 students passed both the math and language portions of the test, about the same as last year. Lakeview Elementary had the highest average this year with almost 90% of students passing both portions of the test. Indiana students are bucking a national decline and filing for a free application for federal student aid. The FAFSA form came out last December, and the U.S. Department of Education has had to work through many issues, which has worried higher education leaders, families, and students. Nationally, fewer students are applying for and receiving this important financial aid.
We are one of the few, if not maybe the only state that is up in overall applications.
Students from low-income and high-minority high schools submitted more applications this year. Ashcraft says there's still time to submit or correct applications. She says students can reach out to the commission or their college or university for help. Monroe County government is recovering from a ransomware attack earlier this month that shut down the courts and disrupted a number of other systems. Another attack currently has Clay County's services on hold. A local high school was reported to have been hacked last week, but that apparently was not the case. So as Ethan Sandwise reports, cyber attacks on local governments are increasing and more security is needed to keep them online.
County IT staff recognized there'd been an unauthorized access to the network on June 30th. They shut down government servers as part of the security response. That forced the court system to close and temporarily shut down other services. The county treasurer and auditor froze their bank accounts, which meant vendors had to wait to be paid.
County government couldn't operate because we didn't have email or access to any of our network drives.
Monroe County says cybercrime syndicate Black Suit pulled off the attack. The Russia-based group has a history of targeting local governments and critical infrastructure.
Malicious actors in cyberspace, they're consistently looking to attack local governments. And so this, not much unlike other attacks that have been happening across the country.
Ransomware blocks access to a victim's files, essentially holding them hostage. Monroe County has plans in case of these events. It had already backed up all of its data on hard drives and managed to recover what was lost. The county immediately reported the incident to the Indiana Office of Technology, as required by state law.
The process that we have worked, and our backup was all secure, and we were able to, it was rather impressive, really, by our technical services department to get us up and running.
Although the government is now functioning as normal, it hasn't said yet whether Black Suit asked for a ransom or what kind of information it stole. It's waiting on the results of a law enforcement investigation.
What I can say is that employee information is secure, and our banking information was secure.
The attack overlapped with 2 other cyber scares in southern Indiana, one real and one purported. Clay County government still has no web services after a ransomware attack which took out its servers on July 9th. The county issued an emergency declaration saying the attack prevents it from providing critical services such as the courthouse, community corrections, and county probation. The Emergency Management Agency declined our request for an interview, saying it didn't want to jeopardize the ongoing investigation. Black Suit also claimed to have hacked the Richland Bean Blossom School Corporation in a post on its dark web site. Local media reported the alleged hack last weekend, but on Monday, the district denied that its servers had been compromised. Still, the school board says it's taking the threat seriously.
All of our data has been secure. Nothing has gotten out of RBB hands, and we took immediate action to look into what was going on.
Documents extracted from the zip file on Black Suit's website bear the logo of Edgewood Primary School in Nottingham, England. Despite the cluster of Indiana targets, Asari says cybercriminals usually cast a wide net rather than target a particular region.
The notion that a hacking group, that a malicious group of actors online is sitting around and thinking, you know what, we're going to go for Monroe County is not what's happening.
Monroe County has cyber insurance, although no claim payments have been made to date. It also regularly tests employees' digital awareness with fake phishing emails. Asari says Indiana and Monroe County have strong security protocols, but it's going to take sustained improvements to stay secure.
And as long as we don't make cybersecurity one of the foremost considerations in our budgeting and investment at a local level, we're going to be stagnant in terms of our cybersecurity posture.
What we're waiting on is the forensics that we're hoping will identify how this event occurred. We're concerned that they're not going to be able to identify it.
The Indiana Executive Council on Cybersecurity recommends any Hoosiers who become victims of cybercrimes follow instructions on its website to know how to respond and recover. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
The FBI reports 60 Hoosiers fell victim to ransomware attacks last year, costing them over $300,000. Well, we're joined now by Clayton Baumgarth for more headlines from around the state. Hi, Clayton.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. The City of Bloomington's Planning and Transportation Department presented two potential options to renovate the Indiana Avenue corridor at a public meeting on Tuesday. Both plans include adding bike lanes to busy street bordering IU's campus. Benta Boutier was at Tuesday's meeting and has more.
The corridor spans a little under a mile from East Smith Avenue to East 10th Street on the west side of IU's campus. The two concepts come from public feedback collected over the last month in more than 200 survey responses.
This is our first, our first attempt at putting something pen to paper, putting some kind of visualization in front of you about how we can make this better based on the concerns that you all communicated to us.
In Concept A, Indiana Avenue would become a one-lane road with a two-way protected bicycle lane. Duncan says this improves safety for pedestrians.
Removing half of those lanes will just inherently make it much more low stress, relaxing, and safe for folks to cross. And along with that, it will slow down motor vehicle traffic and then provide better protected bike connections through our downtown and campus area.
Concept B converts Indiana Avenue into a two-way street. The design also includes bike lanes on either side of the road from Kirkwood Avenue to 6th Street.
I'm of the opinion that we should be discouraging bicycle riding on Indiana Avenue because there are much safer routes. In one direction we have Grant, Lincoln, and Washington that you can ride bicycles on.
Duncan says Concept A and B are preliminary ideas and likely to change with feedback. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
The Planning and Transportation Department will host another public meeting in August to collect more input on the corridor. The long search for the location of Monroe County's next jail could end in August. Commissioner Penny Githen says the county could finish studies and pre-design work for a property near the I-69 and State Road 46 bypass within a month or two. Purchasing that land would cost around $11 million. That's more than the other sites commissioners considered, but factoring in the cost of delays, it would be around a third as much as building on the Thompson property that was being considered, Githen says.
I think it's time to move forward. I think it's time to make a decision on this, and I hope that we can work with our county council colleagues to get something done expeditiously.
She says failing to choose a site quickly would bring significant costs. The county is required to build a new jail after a settlement agreement with the ACLU in 2009, citing overcrowded conditions. The Bloomington Board of Public Works is spending $500,000 to pick up debris from the June 25th storm that tore through Bloomington. During Tuesday's meeting, the board approved a second contract with Williams Tree Company for $350,000. The first contract was agreed to on June 28th. The city estimates almost 50% of the debris left roadside by residents has been picked up.
They've really started in the heaviest hit areas, so it wasn't surprising that they had those higher costs in that first week and a half.
Wason says the city will seek reimbursement for the cleanup costs through a Federal Emergency Management Agency disaster declaration. Monroe County officials unveiled a new reserve ambulance service that will provide basic life support and transfers. The ambulance will be staffed with 2 EMTs. It will serve as backup in the county for 911 calls when all ambulances are in service. The county currently has 2 trucks, but one will serve as a backup.
We're now able to help provide another additional service to our community that's needed. We see all the time that there's more of a burden on the EMS system over and over.
Funding has been allocated for 4 ambulances in total. The money comes from the American Rescue Plan Act. For the 3rd year in a row, Indiana farmers have set a record for the most acres of cover crops planted, more than 1.7 million acres. Cover crops are planted to keep the soil from eroding away, which can pollute streams and lakes. They can also improve the health of the soil as well as control pests and weeds.
And then also farmers doing that and seeing the neighbors seeing the benefits and them speaking to the benefits themselves to other farmers. We've just seen more and more farmers wanting to try them and then having success when they do.
The Inflation Reduction Act gave more than $18 billion to programs that help offset the cost of implementing conservation practices like cover cropping. And finally, the Indiana Barn Foundation is receiving a $100,000 Indiana Landmark grant that will allow the nonprofit to hire its first full-time executive director.
There's a lot going on with the Indiana Barn Foundation, and the opportunity to actually have a paid staff person to oversee that is beyond what we could imagine.
The funding will cover the executive director's position for 3 years. Indiana Barn Foundation will be tasked with raising an additional $80,000 in matching funds by 2026 as per the grant agreement. Indiana Barn Foundation formed in 2013 to support the preservation of iconic rural structures and boost financial incentives for their rehabilitation.
And Clayton, I hear, is there not a meeting coming up too for this?
Tomorrow, open to the public, their annual meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana Democrats pick their candidates for Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General. And a new Medicaid program for elder caregivers has been met with delays and confusion. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
There is going to be a terrible scandal.
Anything interesting?
This is our chance to be together.
The name's Sherlock Holmes. Want to see some more?
Oh, God, yes.
So lovely to see you again.
This is I, Hamlet.
The show must go on.
We'll get along splendidly.
The journalism on PBS, especially in the groundbreaking Gwen and Judy NewsHour years, was particularly inspiring for me as an adult and, of course, as a journalist. But my earliest inspiration came from Mr. Rogers. He's telling me every day to be kind and that he always wanted a neighbor just like me. A generation later, Daniel Tiger taught my girls the same lessons, so they knew that they could be anybody they choose. PBS opens up new perspectives for all of us. Support your PBS station today.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Former state lawmaker Terry Gooden easily secured the Democratic nomination for lieutenant governor at last weekend's state party convention in Indianapolis. Gooden had caused some unease within the party when gubernatorial candidate Jennifer McCormick named him as her pick for running mate. At the State House, Gooden had voted against gay marriage and abortion rights, but in the last few weeks, Gooden apologized for those votes.
You know, I always pride myself on being a lifelong learner, and we've had those conversations, and I think today's vote just reaffirmed folks' confidence in my ability to do the good job.
Destiny Wells was nominated to run for Attorney General, a lieutenant colonel in the Army National Guard. She says she wants to restore professionalism to an office she argues has become hyper-politicized under current Attorney General Todd Rokita. A Democrat hasn't won the governor's office since 2000, and no Democrat has won the Attorney General's office since 1996. Indiana U.S. Senate candidate Jim Banks used his primetime speech at the Republican National Convention Tuesday to lavishly praise former President Donald Trump. Banks spoke during an hour dedicated to Senate candidates and called Trump the greatest and strongest president of his lifetime. He also briefly mentioned policy focusing on immigration and mass deportation.
If you came here illegally under Joe Biden, you're going back to where you came from under Donald Trump.
Banks' opponents in the open U.S. Senate race are Democrat Valerie McRae and Libertarian Andrew Horning. Indiana is introducing Medicaid managed care for people 60 and up. The state launched the Pathways for Aging program this month, which includes transitioning supports and services to managed care companies that charge a flat rate instead of the previous process of fees being settled individually. But as Benta Boutier reports, the changes have led to unanswered questions for caregivers, wait lists for patients, and skepticism for patient advocates.
For the past couple of years, this has been Matt and Jason Harding's routine. Every day, one of the brothers goes to their dad's house in Bedford. Right now, they're making his dinner. One of them also comes over every morning for breakfast. Their dad, John, has dementia. And as his conditions worsened, Matt and Jason have been increasingly worried for their dad. On Matt's days, he arrives around 5:30 a.m. before work.
We get here in the morning, get him his pills, get him something to eat, get him cleaned up. As of right now, he's got home health care workers kind of through a rehab process that come over.
John is just above the limit to qualify for Medicaid. Matt and Jason have hired legal aid to help with the paperwork to qualify. Matt says his dad needs help but isn't ready for a facility. Currently, that's the only option John has for long-term care services through Medicaid.
You're kind of in that middle range, which really, when you apply for Medicaid, works against you.
They can't afford out-of-pocket costs for assisted living, which runs around $3,500 monthly. 20 hours a week of home health aid costs around $2,700 monthly. The Hardings are among thousands of Hoosiers waiting to see what Indiana's new Pathways for Aging program brings, since it took effect July 1st and replaced the aged and disabled waiver. Matt and Jason want their dad to receive home-based care. They've been in touch with their area agency on aging.
If we can apply for home health care, that's great.
In April, the Family and Social Services Administration created a wait list for the aged and disabled waiver to reconcile a $1 billion budget shortfall in Medicaid.
The state just stopped without any advance notice approving waiver cases, and that included home health care and assisted living. So we had some cases that were already started and got stopped and denied.
The FSSA says it will start to process the more than 9,000 people on the wait list, which will take nearly a year. But Trace says there are many people who can't wait that long and might be forced to use nursing homes sooner than they're ready. The Pathways program replaced the state's fee-for-service Medicaid model. The state will instead pay a flat rate to managed care entities to handle long-term care and support services. Most of this was managed by area agencies on aging. Carrie Nowlin says they will still help with intakes for Medicaid programs, but communication with the state and managed care entities is minimal.
With any transition, you're going to have those moments where you realize we overlooked this, we overlooked that, but it really feels like there's a lot of gaps that were overlooked. I wish the boots on the ground folks from the AAAs had been more involved in the planning process.
She wants to know how area agencies are meant to notify a person's managed care entity that an evaluation for the Medicaid waiver is complete.
How specifically does it get transmitted, and will we get any further contact from the MCE, or is it just that we put in that placeholder and we're done? What paperwork do they need? There's just a lot of questions in our normal intake process that haven't been.
Nowlin recommends that anyone who anticipates they or a loved one over 60 will need care get on the wait list as soon as possible. She adds for people who need to take steps to protect assets, moving through the waiver process could take months. For Area 10, which serves Monroe and Owen counties, there are more than 180 people on the waitlist. Matt says figuring out care in the recently changed Medicaid system for his dad has been extremely stressful for the family.
This guy took care of me for 20 plus years. I mean, it's the least I can do.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
And Heps Rock is moving at Indiana University's Memorial Stadium as part of new game day enhancements. Former coach Terry Hepner brought the Rock and the Walk to the game day experience in 2005 before his passing from brain cancer in 2007. IU moved the 3-ton limestone remnant from the north end zone to the east concourse of the stadium, where it will be a part of the Walk with players, coaches, and now fans entering the stadium. IU kicks off the season August 31st against Florida International. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger & Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.